The next concept we are going to study is the shell. A shell is basically a CLI that allows us to control an operating system. The same operating system can have several types of shell installed. One point to keep in mind is that if a programming language has a CLI, then it is also usually called a shell. It is normal that you do not know what a programming language is, we will see it later, but it is important that you know that shell can refer to both CLI. For the moment, let's focus on the shell of operating systems. Every operating system has at least one shell available. In the case of Windows, we usually use PowerShell and CMD. In the case of Mac and Linux, by default, they use the Bash shell or ZSH. Both Bash and ZSH are shells that obey the POSIX protocol. POSIX, which stands for Portable Operating System Interface, is a protocol, a standard, a recipe that indicates the ingredients that a shell should have. POSIX is not a particular software, but a model of how you should build your shell. As I mentioned before, some of the shells that follow the POSIX protocol are Bash, ZSH, and Dash. It is often said that Mac and Linux are very similar to use, and this is precisely because both operating systems use POSIX-based shells. The Dash shell is basically a one-to-one implementation of the POSIX standard. It is very fast and lightweight. Bash is a shell that also implements POSIX, that is, any instruction valid for POSIX is also valid in Bash, but Bash also implements more features that POSIX does not. In the same way, ZSH also implements POSIX, it also implements all the features of Bash, and in turn incorporates more features. ZSH is the developer's favorite shell, because it allows many useful features to be installed when using the CLI. In the case of Windows, PowerShell and CMD do not follow the POSIX protocol, but it is possible to install tools that allow us to use a shell very similar to Bash. The most common is Git Bash. The next two concepts to master and distinguish are console and terminal, as they are often used as synonyms when they are not really the same. A console is basically a box that contains certain hardware. There are many examples: video game consoles, video consoles, CPUs, microwave oven, cell phones, etc. Any hardware that is inside a box can be considered a console. Once this is understood, the definition of terminal is natural. A terminal is an interface that allows you to control a console. All of the above examples have an interface that allows you to control the hardware. That interface is called a terminal. The last concept, we will see what is a terminal emulator, not to be confused with terminal. A terminal emulator is a software that allows us to access the shell, that is to say, the CLI of the operating system. There are many types of terminal emulators. In the case of Mac, for example, the most used are these three: Terminal, iTerm, and Kitty. But there are many others, and each one has different characteristics. For example, in the case of Kitty, it allows us to visualize images. This cannot be done with the other terminal emulators, it is something exclusive to Kitty. In the case of CoCalc, there is only one terminal emulator, so we won't have a problem. Each programmer decides which one to use, but in general all emulators serve the same purpose. These are the most basic concepts that we should have before starting with the practice. In the next video, we will have our first approach to the CLI. We will see some basic commands for Mac and Windows, and then we will start using CoCalc to start learning Linux.